Welcome to today's edition of the Hillbilly Files. I'm Leo, and I'll be your host today. We are in Prestonsburg, Kentucky today, just on the outskirts of Prestonsburg, Kentucky. It's back that way, to bring you guys a story that we almost didn't do. To be honest, some of these stories, some of them are hard to tell. 17 years old. We started to not mess with this story simply because of that, because of her tender age, because of her young age. 17 is, legally speaking, you're just a short distance from being an adult. At 18, you can be sent to war. But anyone who is mature, knows that 17 years old is still a child. No offense to any, of our younger viewers or anything like that, but let me explain it this way. When you were 6, you thought you had all the answers. You thought you knew everything that you needed to know. When you were 10, you thought that 6-year-old you was kind of dumb, was very inexperienced, didn't know much. When you got 20, you thought that younger you was, let's just say, not quite mature. When you get 40, 50 years old, you realize that you weren't an adult till much later in life than you actually thought. So that's why I say it was just a child at 17 years old. Now this story, it's Muriel Baldridge. The date is June 27th, 1949. Summer days, carnivals and flowers and just lazy days of summer. A time when a 17-year-old girl's life was completely ahead of her. She had everything to look forward to. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out that way. You see, Muriel, she was a 17-year-old Prestonsburg cheerleader. She was headed home one evening from a summer carnival right here in town. They had, how carnivals will come to town, that sort of thing. And she had been to this carnival all evening, and it was just getting dark. Muriel was headed home from the carnival with 3 of her friends, and they stopped right there, right about where those vehicles are. See, 3 of her friends lived on one side of the bridge, and she lived on the other side. And they offered to walk her home. But Muriel had crossed this bridge 1,000 times on her own. And, it wasn't really a thing, in her opinion. So she declined to have them walk her home, saying that she wasn't scared to walk home. She walks the bridge all the time, and nothing about tonight is new for her. This was the last time that anyone would ever see Muriel Baldridge alive. Local residents actually heard Muriel screaming for several minutes, but didn't report it to police at the time. They thought that it was just a bunch of happy children over here at the fair, at the carnival, screaming and having fun. So no one paid any attention to Muriel's screams. Later, early the next morning, a school bus driver found her body under the bridge and notified authorities. Her parents, who lived right on the other side of this bridge, they heard all the commotion, but they didn't think anything about it, because of the fair as well. They thought that Muriel was spending the night with one of her friends. So no one really thought much about it. They were still, at this point the next day, they were still unaware of what had happened. They could see a commotion going on outside their house, living only 50 feet from the bridge right over there. But what they didn't know at the time was that it was their daughter. Her parents had refused to identify the body of their own child. So a 15-year-old child, one of Muriel's friends, volunteered to identify the body She had an autopsy, although back in 1949 they weren't exactly the same as what an autopsy would be today. She had died of blunt force trauma to the face and head. And had 5 skull fractures. They said that half of Prestonsburg, Kentucky turned out for her funeral. There were several men who were brought in and questioned by police, but one suspect stood out among the rest. His name was Lon Moles. He was an older, respected member of the community and a member of the Board of Education. He had worked directly with Muriel's father at the railroad office right across the tracks, and you can hear, I don't know if you can hear there, that's why I'm on this side of the bridge. They're working, the railroad is working on the tracks on the other side of the bridge, and it's, you know, it's pretty noisy. So I figured we'd just do the video from this side. Anyhow, local people said that Lon was, quote, creepy friendly, end quote, whenever Muriel came into the office, which was directly in sight of the Baldridge home on the other side of the bridge. Lon, he was a heavy drinker, and it was in a dry county, but he didn't really let that stop him. He had there were several bootleggers, and he had one that he actually preferred. They called it 4 Roses. Anyway, his name was Clyde Goodsey. Now, when it came to court, Clyde Goodsey testified that Lon had came to his house about midnight. He was covered in blood and told Clyde to say that he was never there. Clyde testified to this in court. Others testified that Lon had had scratches, and several other people brought forth evidence that incriminated Lon. But Lon was a respected member of the community. He was on the Board of Education. No one wanted to believe that Lon might have had something to do with it. When it came time for court, Lon's wife testified in court that he had been home and that he was home in bed when all of this happened. Being his wife, I guess they just assumed that, you know, she probably wouldn't cover for her husband for murdering a child, but here we are. Anyway, she testified in court that he was home in bed, and she backed his story up as being 100% true. The jury deliberated for about 2 hours and then came back with the shocking not guilty verdict, mostly because of his wife's testimony. More shockingly, after the trial, all of the evidence was destroyed, excluding the dress that Muriel was wearing at the time. As the 74th anniversary of her murder comes near, I think it's safe to say that the crime may never be solved. It's a pretty good distance. It's a good drive to get over here. But we thought this was important. We think that Muriel's life should be remembered. Just because she wasn't a Hatfield or a McCoy or George Washington or some other historical figure doesn't diminish the fact that her life mattered. And if nothing else, you know, this story should be told, if nothing else, simply as a cautionary tale for young ladies, that there's a lot of wonderful people in the world, And there's a lot of people who would give their life to protect a young lady from harm. But there's a lot of people out there who look at it the other way. There's a lot of people out there who are simply cold-blooded, heartless individuals. But right down here is where her body was found. Right down here under this bridge. They said that when they found the body, they found a lead pipe as well, and a bottle with 4 roses that Lon drank was laying right there. I mean, we will never know for 100%. We will never know for sure. It certainly looks like this was one of the cases where the justice system failed. This young lady's life was taken in a horrific way, and the murderer got away. Most likely because of political connections. There's a possibility someone else did it. There's always that possibility. You never know. But the evidence sure points to Lon. And the thing about it, what makes matters even worse, to add insult to injury, Muriel's father, they worked over here at this railroad yard. Her father and Lon worked together. And after all this was said and done, after the court and after the funeral, and after, like I said, all of it was said and done, Muriel's father wound up working the rest of his career alongside the man who probably murdered his daughter. Now, can you just imagine what that would have been like? We're going here in a minute, and we're going to go find Muriel's grave. Anyway, like I said, we don't like to, we could have sat home and told you this story and showed you pictures of this bridge and showed you pictures of the graveyard. But quite frankly, you don't get the same understanding of the situation unless you're actually there. Unless you go to these places and see the places and see what happened and see the evidence and see the grave. That's when you feel it. She deserves to have her story told. So we're going to do it. I'll see you guys at the graveyard in just a few minutes. Okay, now this is the third one, and I believe to be the correct one. There's actually another one, but I don't think that's it. So far, this will be the third one I've checked. And I'm kind of reluctant to show you guys where I'm parked at. It's quite frankly, I'm ashamed of it, but look at that. People just dumping stuff here. It's awful, ain't it? Anyway, we're near the, I think it's a cement plant, but I'm not sure. Gas company. That's what it is. But if I'm right, Muriel's grave is right up here. I'm not gonna lie, I've had probably more trouble finding this one than just about any other grave we've ever looked for. There was one that I couldn't find the graveyard, and I wound up eventually having to give up on it. But this one I'm kind of going the extra mile for this young lady. I want to find this. I want to find this grave. I see a graveyard right there, and I'm not sure, but I suspect this is it. I've actually stopped several times, half a dozen people, asking questions, you know, just talking to people. And the last one was, well, second to the last. Last one was that guy right there in that truck. But I stopped at a dog groomer's. Heather used to be a dog groomer for many years, and I happen to know that you don't get into dog grooming unless you're a nice person. Mean people, they don't last. They can't do it. So I figured she was probably a nice person, and she was. But if I'm right, her grave is right in here somewhere. Alan? Alan? Wrong death date. Here we are. I think this is there she is. We found her. There it is. Guys, meet Muriel Baldridge. Look at this picture. And tell me that's not heartbreaking. A 17-year-old kid. We wanted to find this girl's grave and tell her story. And in a way, her story should be told a little bit more, because quite frankly, she didn't get to make her story. Her life was taken when she was a little girl. The entire family is gone now. All the evidence is gone now. Muriel's gone. Her parents are gone. And there's nothing left to do but mourn the young lady. That's all that's left.